guys can read along with me, if everybody can see. Everybody read together. Participants agree to identify and will present their harmless from any claims, losses, and damages of any nature resulting from the next 7 minutes of instruction. This is supposed to be a happy face. All right, just a little bit of humor. Want to add that in. So moving right along, and I don't want to block my guys over here on this side of the room. And I don't want to, hold myself on this fault. So to go over the concept of ownership and to state the objective of my presentation. So upon successful completion of this section, participants will be able to recognize and identify the different types of property ownership. Is that clear with everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so there's basically 2 types of ownership if you want to clump those into 2 separate fields. So the first one we're going to go over is severalty ownership. And the key distinction with severalty is that it's a sole ownership. It is not an ownership with another individual or another entity. And in regards to severalty, one of the bullet items I have here is severed or separated, which is keywords you can use in your studies to differentiate the 2 property ownership types. And we have concurrent ownership, which I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one because this one has to deal with several owners or entities owning property. And I do have some examples here. But first, I just want to break down the 3. So you have tenancy in common, you have joint tenancy, and then you have tenancy by entirety. That should actually say tenancy by the entirety. I have a little typo in my presentation here. But I also do have some descriptions and a graph on the far right of the chart where you can see how that's broken down. So you have tenants in common, right here for you guys, just want to point this out. How that would pass along, and then on the right, there's an example of joint tenancy. Can everybody see that? Does anybody have any questions up to this point?
No.
Okay. All right, so going into tenancy in common, tenancy in common imposes the fewest restrictions out of a co-ownership. So, and how they do that is each co-owner owns a separate title, and they don't, own a specific portion of the property. Meaning that if you're in co-ownership with somebody, you can't say, well, I own the garage, or I own the kitchen, or I own the, the bedroom. It is the property as a whole. So, in regards to that, you own a specific portion or percentage, not, a specific piece of the property in the whole. And the other distinction is that you can sell, mortgage, will, transfer, or, share without the other's consent. So you don't need their consent to sell your portion of that property. And joint tenancy is a little bit different. The one key characteristics with joint tenancy is that there's one title. So you have one title in joint tenancy, and upon death, the interest automatically passes to that remaining, the remaining co-owner. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Any questions up to this point? You guys are an easy crowd. And another key distinction is that it cannot be inherited. So on this slide, I just want to go over again, and I do have another typo I noticed. It's tenancy by the entirety. But tenancy by the entirety, one key distinction is that that's reserved for married couples. And I do remember earlier we had a similar presentation that covered this as well. But I did want to show you, I have the graph here that kind of makes it easy for you to compare and contrast versus the time, title, interest, possession, and person you can see tenancy by the entirety, which, you know, for one, I have down here that it's not recognized in Georgia, but in other states. So Georgia law does not recognize tenancy by the entirety. But just wanted to give you a breakdown of how that looks on the chart. But specifically, the keys with that is that it's exclusive for married couples. Neither spouse can sell his or her interest without the other's consent. And also, you know, creditor, if one of the spouses has debt, the creditor cannot come in and basically sell a portion of that property to satisfy that debt. Does anybody have any questions on this slide? And real briefly to wrap this up, there are other forms of ownership. Typically you're going to have either public or private ownership. Public, you know, is by government, could be parks or something of that nature. Private, you know, breaks down into community property, tenancy and partnership. You have limited liability companies, you have trusts, you have syndicates. You have condominium ownership, and also cooperative ownership is another form as well. Do I have any questions on this slide here? You guys are awesome. Any questions?